Next I read is Slayer by Kristen White. And I should mention that you should probably be familiar with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show, before going into this book, otherwise you might be a little bit lost. This book touches a little bit on some of the history, but not that much. As you've probably guessed, you probably know that this is from the world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is my all-time favorite TV show. Okay, I am obsessed with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've been watching it since I was probably middle school, something like that. But yeah, so needless to say, I was super excited for this book. Or series, actually. I realized after I bought this says book 1, so there are more books planning to come out. However, I did try not to set my expectations too high with the anticipation that things weren't going to be perfect, as it is like a fan fiction or retelling. Actually, I think it's a fan fiction. So it's not really retelling because they're not retelling any part of the story. They're just kind of adding on to it. So I anticipated that it would be different. As for the setting, I think it's important to state the timeline. This takes place sometime after season 7 of the TV show. I think if you're caught up on the TV show, then you're just fine. And to recap what happened, in the last episode, Willow basically uses the power of the Scythe, which is the Slayer's weapon, and releases its power so that all potential Slayers can have the power that the Slayer alone holds. So now there's hundreds of Slayers walking around. This book does say that this is basically the story of the very last Slayer. Also, another thing that you need to know, Caleb in season 7, who's an uber bad guy, blew up the Watchers Council, killing most of the members. This book focuses on the Watchers side of the story, which I thought was fantastic from the get-go, and it's particularly the descendants of the Watchers. We have our main character, Nina, and her twin sister Artemis are studying to be Watchers. Now, Nina really hates Buffy, and it seems like all Slayers, which kind of doesn't make sense to me since it's kind of their job, is to watch Slayers. Even though they aren't really doing it anymore since all these Slayers, they don't have enough Watchers, they kind of don't have a purpose, I guess? I don't know. So it feels like a curse worse than death when she is endowed with Slayer powers. And she is the last Slayer. Initially, while reading this book, I was really disappointed. The writing starting out was really choppy and difficult to read. Thankfully, that kind of got cleared up, and overall, I ended up really enjoying the book, mostly the concept, although I still have some issues with the book. To be honest, I'd have to rewatch the show to fact check, but I'm not entirely sure that the Watcher's calling is hereditary. Maybe it is, I don't know. Other issues I was having, like how much Nina hates Buffy, were thankfully cleared up as it was a misunderstanding, and I really loved the turn that the story took. But I did use Bookly while reading this book, and I used the notes section. I've been using it for a little while, but I've never really utilized like taking notes. So basically, I just decided to go ahead and share the notes that I was taking. Page 24, I was really confused until this point. The writing is choppy. They blame Buffy for the balance being out of whack, but she was really only the result of Willow's magic. So minus a point for Buffy history accuracy. The biggest problem I see are all the names. And so it really messes up with like your flow while you're reading. Oh my god, I forgot about this part. Okay, so the names killed me, and I talk about the names a couple times. Like whenever you're writing like a term paper or something, you address the person Beth Smith the first time you mention them, so we know who that person is. And then every time you mention them after, you either just say Beth, like we know Beth is Beth Smith, unless there's two Beths with different last names, then you obviously either need to call them by their last name, to differentiate them, but you don't need like a really long name. And I have an example of that in a minute. A first, middle, and last name, or a first name and a hyphenated last name. And every time you read about that character or they're mentioned, their entire long-winded name is written. They have the Littles, but they don't have names. They're just called the Littles every time they are mentioned. They spent so much time coming up with the most obscure names for everybody else, but then they couldn't give two little kids at least a first name. Moving on. Regarding names, we have two familiar names from the Buffy franchise. Wanda Wyndham Pierce. The other Wyndham Pierce that we know is Wesley Wyndham Pierce. Wesley was the Watcher of Faith when Giles got fired, and he goes off to LA, leads some really messed up life. I don't remember him having any kids, do you? I mean, I guess this is fan fiction, so maybe he had kids for the purposes of a fan fiction. I don't know. I didn't think that these kinds of things were going to bug me so much. But, okay, so we have Wesley and Wanda. And I guess it's not uncommon for people to, like, have a play on words like, I'm Michelle, my son's Michael, kind of thing. But I don't know. So when I mentioned that the names just don't go well together, Wanda Wyndham Price, it's like you really have to slow down to say that name. Wesley Wyndham Price goes well together. Oh, every time a character is mentioned, the entirety of the long name is written out. And I think that's really annoying. And it's only done with a couple characters, like Wanda Wyndham Price. Every time she is mentioned, and I think it's because she's a character from the original franchise, but then other characters, it's like, oh, well, we added you, but like, we don't really care about you. Oh, that's right. Wesley comes in as Buffy's Watcher, and then Miss Post comes in as Faith's Watcher, but she was an excommunicated Watcher who goes evil, and she gets killed. But apparently she has a descendant, Imogen Post, and granted she was a little bit older, so it is likely that before she came into Faith's life that she had children. And that's not a bad name. I like Imogen. I think Imogen Post works well. Also, I didn't really care for the crossover names. I was waiting for them to have a bigger role, but they don't have a really big role, and so it kind of feels like a name drop. Oh, okay. Imogen Post is the daughter of Gwendolyn Post. Here are some other names. When I said they spent a lot of time coming up with really creative names, like, here's a list of names. Honora, Wanda Wyndham Price, Zabuto, I guess, Cillian, Artemis, and Nina is short for something. I forgot, but they're named after, like, I don't know if is that like a god or something? I don't remember. And it's explained in the book, but it just, like, wasn't important to me because I don't think that's a good name to name a kid. I don't know. Rise, there it is. There's that name again. I don't know how to pronounce it. R-H-Y-S, Rise. Oh, Honora and Wanda are always mentioned with their last name. Imogen is either just Imogen or just Post. There's no consistency. Zabuto has just been Zabuto until page 23. We get a first name, Ruth. Like, I thought Zabuto was the first name. Then the first name is dropped again. I just can't even with these names anymore. Nina says that she has no idea what being a Slayer means. In fact, the whole idea of hating Buffy and Slayers, it goes against the grain. That's kind of what Watchers are for. They take it out on Buffy, although it was Giles' fault for not being a stronger Watcher and letting Buffy run rampant. But they hold Giles in high esteem, which is kind of dumb that they shun Slayers because of the rogue Slayer who left the council, which is Buffy. She did get to a point where she left the council, if you've seen the show. But then, and this is where kind of the story gets messed up again, because in the show, what is it, season 6? Yeah, season 6, Glory comes to Sunnydale, and she's like, super uber bitch god. The council goes to Sunnydale to visit Buffy, and like they settle everything out and they're all cool. This wasn't following that storyline. There's one character, Cillian. I really had to appreciate this quote from him. So Nina finds out she's a Slayer, and I swear to God, she was getting on my freaking nerves. So I was trying to look past it. But she just kept going, I hate Slayers. I don't want to be a Slayer. There's no way. I'm not doing this. Da 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 da. Cillian says, when are you going to admit you're a Slayer? That's the whole reason you lot do your job. It's multitasking. I'm like, right? This whole idea of Nina hating Buffy too, I just hate this. Who else is powerful enough to stop the forces of evil? Like, seriously, as a watcher, I mean, no wonder she's not ever going to be a watcher. If she can't grasp this concept, like, watchers should know better than anybody that you need Slayers to keep the balance of good and evil. Oh, okay. So at first I was reading this and I was like, oh, cool, there's like Buffy lingo. Michelle, how come this did not occur to me before this? As much as I appreciate very Buffiness of the lingo, it was really only the Scoobies who talked that way, being Buffy, Willow, and Xander. And some other friends that came in, but it still even still, the side characters didn't always talk the way that those three did. It makes no sense that they would be talking like Buffy because A, they hate Buffy, B, aren't they like English or something? And C, they are the descendants of Watchers who like really don't talk like that. They should be talking like Giles, right? What the fuck? Okay, so a lot of the problems I had at the beginning of the book started to actually clear up. She's actually starting to consider that maybe Buffy has a really hard job. I love that changed, and I think that changed my thoughts on the book entirely. Really boosted my rating from like a 1 star, maybe a 3 star, because she kind of like, she was just under this huge misunderstanding about Buffy and Slayers. So that's when things actually started to get better for me, and I won't bore you with the rest of my commentary on that subject. Another book I read was City of Bones. This was a reread for me, and I had so much fun reading this book. Honestly, this book is talked about all the freaking time on BookTube, and unless you've been living under a rock, you probably already know everything there is to know about this book. So I'm not going to waste your time and make this video longer by explaining what it's about, but I just had so much fun reading it. Next up, I read 5 Feet Apart by Rachael Lippincott. This is about 2 high school aged cystic fibrosis patients. It's told from 2 perspectives. Stella Grant, who is a YouTuber, yay, bonus points for cool character just by being a YouTuber, and she's also on the list for a lung transplant. And the other perspective is told from Will Newman, who undergoes clinical drug trials for his cystic fibrosis. So all CF patients must stay 6 feet apart. It's the rule so that they don't spread a bacteria that can be life-threatening to other CF patients. It's pretty obvious that Will and Stella are going to fall for each other, but they can never be close. I just thought that this book overall was just really enlightening about cystic fibrosis. I didn't know much about it at all. And I also really loved all the characters. I thought Stella was such a cool character, and they're all super cool. I thought it had a really cute slow burn relationship development. And overall, this was just a really cute contemporary that wasn't the worst tearjerker that I've ever read. Hello, The Curiosities. I wasn't gonna read this book because I thought that it was gonna make me cry, and it did, but I'm still really glad that I read it. I will avoid a book if I feel like it's one of those ones where inevitably somebody is going to die and I'm gonna hate this book because it made me cry so bad and it made me sad because I don't like being sad. So I was avoiding reading this book, but then like I chose this book for the challenge to read a book and then watch the movie, which I didn't even watch the movie, and I read it before the readathon for that challenge, so that didn't really work out, and I still haven't watched the movie, but I want to. I cannot talk about this book without mentioning that it felt very much like John Green's Fault in Our Stars. And even, well, no, that book's a little bit different. I was gonna say Everything, Everything by Nicola Yoon, but that one actually is a bit different. But it definitely feels like No Fault in Our Stars in the sense that it's kind of like the same formula, like a cookie cutter. Like you have a boy and you have a girl and they're both sick and then they meet like in a hospital, or No Fault in Our Stars, they meet in like a meeting and then they end up falling for each other. It felt very much the same. For example, why I decided to mention that is because for quite a while there seemed to be like a formula for YA, and it seems like when like you just know there are certain things that are going to happen because it's a YA, or how it's going to play out because it's a YA. And so that's kind of where I'm kind of going with that thought is, but I've only read the 2 or 3 with Everything. Other people who read more contemporary books than I read, I would actually really want to know if this is really common or I just got lucky. But like I said, it's not really problematic. They're still really enjoyable. It didn't take away from my enjoyment of the book. I just felt like I had to mention it. Moving on to the last book that I wanted to mention for the month is Illuminae, and I did talk about this in my Reading Rush vlog. Anyways, Illuminae Files, this is the first in a trilogy, and it is written by Amie Kauffman and J. Kristoff. This is actually the second Amie Kauffman book I read this month. Totally by accident, and if I had gotten my hands on Aurora Rising, I would have read 3 Amie Kauffman books, but I couldn't get it from my library. And then just because of the fact that I would have had 3 books by the same author in 1 month, I really wanted the book at that point, but it just didn't happen. My library is lame and didn't have it in stock. So anyways, so this is a science fiction novel, and honestly, I probably should have read the summary before I started reading the book because I feel like it would have really helped me understand what the heck was going on. I'm going to summarize this book from what I got out of it. I did refresh my memory by reading the summary, but it felt like a different book from what I actually got out of the book. So I'm going to tell you my summary. So we have our 2 main characters who are Katie and Ezra. They live on like separate spaceships, and they are in the process of fleeing before another ship catches up to them because they are going to kill them. Basically blow up their spaceships. Then while they're dealing with all of that, there is a virus outbreak on the ship. And they are doing the very best that they can to contain it, but it is fast moving and basically wiping out everybody who lives on the ship. This virus is kind of zombie-ish in the way that it creates extreme rage and violence. And it's also airborne, which is kind of freaky. So they just have to be in the same room with an infected person and they could potentially be infected. And then there's Aiden. Woo! Aiden is a supercomputer and he sees all the emails, all phone calls, he sees into all security cameras. Like, he knows everything. And they had actually shut him down before because they were afraid of him, that he was going to kill everyone, so they had to shut him down. But they decided that they needed to start him back up again so that they could save him, and then they would figure out how to shut him down again. But Aiden's too smart for that. Aiden is almost kind of more human. He's like really humanistic, which is kind of freaky. Oh, Ezra is like a soldier, and then Katie is like this little badass hacker, which is really cool. I thought she was a cool character. And that's pretty much what I got from reading this. So after reading the summary on Goodreads, it turns out Katie's planet had like been invaded. Apparently, the oppressing warships that were after them to kill them are megacorporations, which I'm kind of lost in understanding what that's about, like at all. Honestly, like I don't get it. I didn't see the purpose. It felt more like it was centered around Katie and Ezra's relationship and Aiden. This whole conflict of how it started, why these warships are after them, I just didn't feel like they really explained that at all. But I ended up really liking the book, which I'm surprised. I really did end up liking it. I feel like maybe it's because this is 600 pages and they could have shortened it to like 150 to 200 pages and said the same thing. And there was like 40 pages of just going through corridors and using like way overly done techie language that I just didn't understand. It was very wordy in some sections, and there were like documents and documents going back and forth between the captain of this ship and the sergeant of this ship and the captain of this other thing, and like I just didn't understand how they all like work together, how they fit together. Like I couldn't picture it at all. Was so lost that it didn't even stick. So I feel like there was a lot of pages that I read for no reason at all. Katie and Ezra's relationship was mildly entertaining at best, but it was getting better, so I was interested in seeing how that all played out. But then the ending, oh my gosh, that twist, Aiden was Ezra, oh my god, that was crazy. And then how like Aiden like was kind of a friend and like was starting to love Katie and like wanted to see her get out, and then Katie like saves a piece of Aiden. Like that was really cool. I loved the ending. Okay, I'm glad I read this book. When I got calmed down from the high of finishing the book and ending up really liking it, okay, maybe I exaggerated a little bit. That pretty much sums up my journey of getting through Illuminae, and I am excited to pick up the next book. Eventually. It's not something I'm gonna rush to go read right now, but I am going to approach it differently, I think, which will serve in a much better reading experience. That wraps up my July reading wrap up, and like I said, I'm not sure I'm gonna do a wrap up like this in the future. I just feel like, especially for these busy months, it was really daunting to do this, and I feel like this video is going to be excruciatingly long for you guys. Okay, now it's time to edit this video.